Meghan Markle posted a bizarre video on her social media yesterday, which sent several people into absolute meltdown.
What happens when a carefully crafted public image starts to crack, live, online, and in real time? Meghan Markle's latest video was meant to be uplifting, but it set off a chain reaction that left fans confused, studios backing away, and a media empire at risk.
Here's the problem. We don't like you, Meghan Markle. We don't like you. And no amount of posting videos that you think are going to humanize you will make us like you.
From social media missteps to behind-the-scenes fallout at Netflix, this isn't just another celebrity headline. Meghan Markle has never been a stranger to public attention. Since stepping into the global spotlight through her relationship with Prince Harry, she has managed to stay at the center of headlines, sometimes praised, other times criticized. But this time, the focus is on something entirely different. A single Instagram video, posted with the intention of being lighthearted and empowering, has instead triggered a wave of controversy that few could have predicted. The video in question appeared to be a casual, personal message from Meghan. It was styled to come across as relatable, aiming to show her personality beyond the formalities and public appearances. In it, she dances, jokes, and shares her perspective on motherhood. Her goal, she later explained, was to break down the idea that becoming a parent means losing your identity. She wanted to show that moms can still have fun, still be themselves, and still use their voice. At first glance, that message doesn't sound controversial. In fact, many people would agree with the sentiment. The issue, however, was with the delivery. Viewers who watched the clip noticed something felt off, not just in the performance itself, but in the tone, setting, and even the details of how it was presented. What was supposed to feel spontaneous and uplifting instead came across as awkward, overly polished, and at times confusing. One of the more talked about elements was the appearance of what looked like a baby bump. Online users quickly pointed out that the shape seemed inconsistent in different shots. Some viewers noticed the bump appeared to shift or change position, which led to speculation and conspiracy theories across social media platforms. While these kinds of rumors often spiral beyond the facts, the sheer volume of commentary added another layer of tension to the situation. Beyond the visuals, many felt the energy of the video was hard to pin down. It wasn't clear whether it was meant to be funny, emotional, inspiring, or all of the above. Meghan's expressions and movements were described by some as overly rehearsed, giving the video a sense of trying too hard to go viral or make a statement. Instead of being embraced as charming or relatable, it left many viewers scratching their heads. The internet responded fast. Within hours of the video being posted, it began trending across platforms. And unlike some of her previous public moments, the reaction this time wasn't split. Even among people who had supported Meghan in the past, there was a tone of confusion and concern. Some fans tried to defend the intent behind the video, saying it was just a creative attempt to connect. But others admitted they didn't understand what the message was supposed to be, or why it felt so forced. As the online commentary grew, traditional media began to take notice too. Articles started popping up, not only breaking down the video frame by frame, but also analyzing the reaction it had caused. Entertainment writers pointed out the risks public figures face when trying to reinvent themselves or show a more casual side, especially in a media environment where every detail is scrutinized. The broader conversation turned into one about authenticity, what it means, and whether or not Meghan had successfully conveyed it in this particular moment. Meanwhile, the conversation reached the boardrooms. Meghan's existing relationships with entertainment platforms like Netflix meant that any public attention, positive or negative, had business implications. Sources close to the matter reported that executives were not pleased with the attention the video was attracting. Netflix had previously worked closely with Meghan and Prince Harry on content, including their series With Love, Meghan. Now, they found themselves in a difficult position. Reports suggested that Netflix co-CEO Greg Peters was especially concerned about the optics. He had already been cautious about the platform's high-profile partnerships, and this unexpected PR situation added to his doubts. On the other hand, Ted Sarandos, another senior leader who had reportedly been more involved with the couple's media projects, was described as more supportive, though even he was said to be taken aback by the response. Outside of Netflix, other companies also began reevaluating their ties. Paramount, according to industry insiders, made a swift decision to back away. While they didn't make a public announcement, sources claim they ended all ongoing discussions with Meghan and her team. The reasoning seemed clear. With the backlash growing and public opinion shifting, many didn't want to be part of the unfolding drama. What's striking about this situation is how quickly the momentum changed. A video that was likely intended to be a small, uplifting update on Meghan's life as a mom ended up opening the door to widespread criticism. It wasn't just about the video itself. It was about the way it was interpreted and what it seemed to represent. For some, it highlighted a disconnect between Meghan's message and her audience. For others, it reinforced existing concerns about her media strategy. This isn't the first time Meghan has faced public scrutiny, but this particular incident felt different to many observers. It wasn't sparked by a scandal, a controversial comment, or a major press appearance. It was something that on the surface seemed harmless and even well-meaning. And yet the way it landed suggested a deeper problem, that Meghan's attempts to reintroduce herself to the public might no longer be resonating the way they once did. Part of the challenge here could be timing. Audiences today are quick to react, and expectations for public figures have changed. There's a growing demand for authenticity, real moments, honest perspectives, and relatability that doesn't feel manufactured. Whether or not Meghan's video was sincere, the perception that it was overly scripted or curated worked against it. Another issue might be the broader context. Meghan and Harry have built a post-royal brand that mixes personal storytelling with social commentary. That strategy has worked in some places, but it also comes with risk. When your personal image is closely tied to your professional work, any public misstep can affect both. And in this case, a single piece of content has triggered both public backlash and internal tension across media partnerships. As the days passed, the conversation didn't die down. More voices joined in, not just on social media, but also in entertainment news, analysis pieces, and industry podcasts. Some tried to explain what might have gone wrong with the video's production. Others offered advice on how Meghan could have approached it differently. But the common thread was that something had changed. A public figure who once drew attention simply by speaking out was now facing questions about whether the audience still wanted to listen. At the center of it all was Netflix, arguably Meghan's most high-profile professional partner since stepping away from royal duties. The streaming platform had invested in her and Prince Harry's content production company and had already released projects like the documentary Harry and Meghan, as well as Meghan's lifestyle-themed series With Love, Meghan. These projects had generated significant interest, with strong viewership numbers and plenty of media coverage. But with the new wave of criticism following her viral video, that partnership was starting to look a lot more complicated. According to sources familiar with internal discussions at Netflix, concern among the company's leadership started almost immediately after the video gained traction online. Co-CEO Greg Peters was reportedly alarmed by the scale and tone of the backlash. While Netflix has been known to stand by controversial content in the past, this situation felt different. It wasn't just that people didn't like the video, it was that the reaction was widespread, and even Meghan's supporters were finding it hard to defend. Internally, Peters was said to be pushing for distance. He reportedly felt that the company needed to protect its brand image and avoid being dragged into a media storm that showed no signs of quieting down. Peters believed that continuing to align with Meghan, at least without some kind of public course correction, could hurt Netflix's credibility with both viewers and investors. In private meetings, he voiced concerns about the direction of With Love, Meghan, and the risks of continuing with the second season as planned. But not everyone at Netflix shared that stance. Ted Sarandos, the company's other co-CEO, had played a more hands-on role in the couple's projects. He was seen as someone who believed in their creative vision and was reportedly more patient when it came to controversy. In this case, Sarandos initially pushed back against the idea of cutting ties too quickly. He argued that the video, while poorly received, didn't reflect the entire scope of Meghan's work with the platform. He also suggested that public opinion can shift over time and that canceling projects too early could backfire. This disagreement created noticeable tension within the company. Members of Netflix's executive board reportedly began to take sides. Some felt that continuing to invest in Meghan's brand, especially with the second season of her show already completed, was a business risk. Others argued that the backlash might blow over, and that abandoning the partnership too soon could appear reactionary. While Netflix was debating internally, other companies moved more decisively. Paramount, which had been in early conversations with Meghan's team about possible collaborations, quickly pulled away. Though there was no official press release, multiple entertainment outlets confirmed that Paramount had ended discussions and would not be pursuing any projects in the near future. Industry insiders described it as a clean break, made to avoid association with what was now becoming a high-risk public image. It wasn't just Paramount. Other studios, networks, and production houses that had once shown interest in working with Meghan began to quietly back away. Some stopped returning calls. Others canceled meetings or delayed follow-up discussions indefinitely. The common theme across these reactions was caution. In Hollywood, where image and brand alignment are everything, companies prefer to avoid being tied to individuals who are seen as unpredictable or whose public perception is in decline. From a business standpoint, this reaction wasn't particularly surprising. Meghan's brand had always relied heavily on a mix of personal storytelling and polished media appearances. That strategy had worked well for several years, especially when she was redefining her image post-royalty. But with this latest incident, the cracks in that image became harder to ignore. For many executives, the video marked a shift in how Meghan was perceived, not just by audiences, but by the industry itself. Adding to the uncertainty was the status of With Love, Meghan Season 2. Even before the video controversy, test screenings had reportedly produced underwhelming results. Viewers described the episodes as uneven, overly scripted, and lacking emotional depth. While Netflix hadn't yet made a final decision on the show's release, the response raised serious questions about its viability. Now, with the video backlash thrown into the mix, the project was on even shakier ground. Inside Netflix, the stakes were growing. Marketing teams were said to be unsure how to promote the new season without drawing more attention to the controversy. Public relations teams were monitoring social media closely and fielding concerns from partners, sponsors, and media outlets. Even departments that weren't directly involved with Meghan's projects were reportedly feeling the pressure, as the company's broader brand image was being pulled into the conversation. Meanwhile, Meghan was not standing still. According to sources, she was actively trying to stabilize the situation by shopping new ideas to other platforms. Her team had reportedly reached out to executives at MTV, Disney, and other media brands in an attempt to gauge interest in potential future projects. The pitches were said to include content related to motherhood, wellness, and personal growth, topics that had formed the core of her public identity in recent years. However, the reception to these pitches appeared lukewarm at best. Executives were wary of committing to anything new while the current controversy was still playing out. For many, the idea of investing in Meghan's next venture felt risky. It wasn't just about whether the content would perform, it was about whether the public would still be interested, or whether her brand had become too divisive to carry a major media project. It's important to note that controversy alone doesn't always end a career in entertainment. Many public figures have bounced back from backlash with the right messaging, strategic partnerships, or even simply by laying low for a period of time. But in Meghan's case, the combination of a misjudged video, internal industry tensions, and declining fan enthusiasm made the situation harder to manage. There was no clear recovery strategy in sight. At the same time, media coverage of the story continued to intensify. News outlets began publishing longer pieces analyzing Meghan's career trajectory and questioning whether her media brand was still viable. Opinion columns and entertainment podcasts dissected the fallout in detail, often focusing on the mismatch between Meghan's message and how it was perceived. Some asked whether the public had simply lost interest, or whether something deeper had shifted in how Meghan was being viewed. Through it all, one thing became clear. The relationship between Meghan Markle and the entertainment industry had entered a new, more fragile phase. Her ability to attract attention had never been in doubt. But attention doesn't always translate to success, and in this case, it has brought more problems than opportunities. She framed it as a piece of content that was meant to inspire, especially for those who feel unseen or overwhelmed by the pressures of raising children. The core idea was that motherhood shouldn't require women to give up who they are, and that laughter and playfulness should still be part of that experience. On paper, that's a powerful message, but the way it was received was far from what she likely expected. The problem, many felt, was that the response missed the mark. Instead of acknowledging that the video hadn't landed as intended, Meghan leaned into a narrative that the public had misunderstood her. In interviews and public statements that followed, she maintained that the video was authentic and meaningful, that it came from a personal place, and that the backlash was more about unfair expectations than anything she'd done wrong. This created an immediate disconnect. Many viewers weren't reacting negatively because they misunderstood her goal. They were reacting because the tone of the video felt out of touch. The styling, the delivery, and the overall vibe gave the impression of someone trying to be relatable, but from a place of privilege that made the message harder to connect with. For someone living in a multi-million-dollar mansion with access to nannies, private health care, and a media team, positioning herself as a voice for everyday parents didn't quite ring true for a lot of people. Still, Meghan didn't back down. In what many described as a surprising move, she released a podcast-style monologue shortly after the controversy peaked. It wasn't a traditional interview or a casual discussion with a host. It was simply Meghan speaking alone without interruptions for nearly an hour. She touched on a range of topics, including parenting, personal growth, and the criticism she'd received. But what stood out most was the tone. She referred to herself in the third person at times, saying things like, "The world hasn't seen the real Meghan yet," and framing her current experience as part of a much larger emotional journey. To her supporters, it may have sounded like a woman standing her ground and owning her truth. But to many others, it came across as overly self-focused and detached from the reality her audience lives in. There was a growing sense that Meghan wasn't truly engaging with the criticism she was receiving, but rather pushing forward with her original message without making any meaningful adjustments. The result was a widening gap between her and the very people she had hoped to inspire. What's more, the public response to the monologue wasn't particularly warm. Online engagement was noticeably lower than usual, and even among her fan base, the tone had shifted. People who had once defended her passionately began expressing confusion or fatigue. The common sentiment was that she wasn't reading the room, that she was continuing to speak at people instead of listening to them. In the media world, perception is everything. Authenticity isn't just about what you say, it's about how people receive it. And when audiences start to feel like they're being talked down to or misunderstood, they tend to tune out. That's exactly what appeared to be happening. The comments on Meghan's posts became more critical. Engagement numbers dropped. Even previously supportive outlets began covering her story with a more cautious or critical tone. Behind the scenes, this shift was also being noticed. According to sources within the entertainment industry, her podcast-style response didn't help restore confidence among potential media partners. In fact, it may have confirmed some of their concerns, that Meghan was struggling to connect with audiences in a genuine way and wasn't willing to adapt her approach. For companies already hesitant to continue working with her, it became another sign that the brand they had once invested in was no longer resonating. At its core, the issue wasn't Meghan's message. The idea of celebrating motherhood while keeping your individuality intact is relatable to many. But when that message is wrapped in a presentation that feels scripted, distant, or overly polished, the connection gets lost. And that's what seemed to be happening here. Rather than rebuilding trust or re-engaging her audience, Meghan's response may have unintentionally pushed people further away. It highlighted a growing divide between the world she lives in and the world she's trying to speak to. A gap that, if left unaddressed, could make future projects even harder to sell or sustain. For years, Meghan had positioned herself as someone reshaping the rules. She walked away from the royal family, spoke out about mental health, racism, and media pressure, and built a new platform in the United States with big-name partnerships and a growing production slate. But over time, the charm of the narrative started to fade. And with the latest incident, even her most loyal fans were beginning to show signs of fatigue. Across social media, the change was clear. Posts that once attracted thousands of supportive comments were now drawing far fewer interactions, and those that did engage were more critical. Followers questioned the sincerity of her messaging and the consistency of her public persona. Some even began deleting past posts supporting her, saying they no longer felt comfortable being associated with the direction things had taken. When a public figure starts to lose their base, it's usually not because of one major scandal. It's because of a slow, gradual erosion of trust. That's exactly what seemed to be happening here. And it wasn't just fans and followers who were backing away. Media outlets that had once championed Meghan's story started to reduce their coverage or shift to a more neutral tone. The headlines became more measured. Opinion pieces became more analytical. Even the more supportive press stopped treating her as a cultural force and started referring to her as a polarizing figure, or media wildcard. Meanwhile, industry insiders were reportedly growing increasingly wary of being associated with her. Internally at Netflix, the debate over With Love, Meghan Season 2 hadn't been resolved. The show was completed, but the lack of strong early feedback had raised doubts about its release strategy. Normally, a project backed by someone of Meghan's profile would get a full-scale promotional campaign, trailers, interviews, social media pushes, and talk show appearances. But this time, things were unusually quiet. The marketing teams at Netflix were said to be hesitant. There was a noticeable lack of enthusiasm around the project, with insiders claiming it felt more like an obligation than a priority. Some at the company reportedly wanted to delay the release altogether, while others argued that they should just release it quietly and move on. Regardless of which path was chosen, the excitement that once surrounded Meghan's media presence had clearly faded. To make matters worse, Meghan was still pushing hard behind the scenes. Reports surfaced that she was pressuring Netflix to greenlight a third season of With Love, Meghan, even though the second hadn't aired yet. According to sources close to the situation, she was using whatever influence she had left, including personal appeals to senior executives. That included Ted Sarandos, who had supported her in earlier stages of her deal with the platform. But even Sarandos, according to those familiar with internal conversations, was finding it difficult to justify continued investment. The numbers weren't strong, the public interest was shrinking, and the risk of further backlash was high. Greg Peters, the other co-CEO, had reportedly already made up his mind. For him, the situation had become too much of a distraction. He was said to be rallying Netflix's board to cut ties and protect the brand. Outside of Netflix, other entertainment brands weren't showing much interest either. Meghan's team was actively shopping new ideas to companies like Disney and MTV, but the feedback was mixed at best. Executives respected her name recognition, but they were cautious about committing resources to someone who, at least at the moment, felt unpredictable in terms of public appeal. The fear wasn't necessarily about scandal, it was about relevance. If audiences were no longer listening, then any new project risked falling flat before it even launched. The underlying issue was simple. Meghan had gone from being a media asset to a potential liability. For someone once seen as a cultural disruptor with a powerful voice, that's a dramatic shift. But it reflects a broader trend in how public figures are viewed today. Audiences are less interested in carefully curated personas and more drawn to people who seem grounded, responsive, and aware of their surroundings. And while Meghan has certainly faced her share of unfair treatment and harsh criticism over the years, what seemed to be happening now wasn't rooted in gossip or tabloid speculation. It was a genuine disconnect between her messaging and how it was received. People weren't just criticizing the video or the podcast. They were questioning whether her story still held the weight it once did. In many ways, it felt like Meghan was trying to power through a difficult moment without fully addressing what had changed. Her insistence on continuing as if nothing was wrong, pushing new pitches, requesting renewals, releasing long solo statements, created the impression of someone determined to stay relevant, but perhaps not aware of how the public had shifted around her. At the same time, there was still a level of sympathy from some corners. There were those who believed that Meghan's fall in popularity was less about her actions and more about the unforgiving nature of celebrity culture. That once a narrative turns against someone, it's almost impossible to reverse it without a major change in strategy. Whether or not that's true in Meghan's case is still up for debate. But one thing is certain: continuing down the same path won't be enough. As Season 2 of With Love, Meghan quietly moves toward its release, there's little indication that it will mark a comeback. There's no major campaign, no buzz, no signs of a re-energized audience waiting to tune in. And unless something changes dramatically, the project may simply be remembered as the moment when things truly started to slip away. Whether this marks the end of Meghan's time in the spotlight or just a difficult chapter in a longer story remains to be seen. But for now, it seems clear that the public has stopped watching with curiosity and started watching with doubt.